Cruise ships promise fun, sun, and adventure for everyone, from couples to solo travelers. But where people gather, danger sometimes lurks. Amidst the laughter and luxury, some vacations end in tragedy. These aren't your typical cruise stories. Here are 5 disturbing cruise ship deaths that will leave you shocked, unsettled, and completely speechless. On September 23, 2002, 42-year-old Diane Brimble stepped aboard the Pacific Sky cruise ship, eager to begin what was supposed to be a dream 10-day vacation. Accompanied by her daughter, sister, and niece, Diane looked forward to an unforgettable family getaway to Noumea, New Caledonia, and Vanuatu. But within just 24 hours of setting sail, that dream turned into a tragic nightmare. That evening, Diane headed to the ship's disco to unwind, dance, and enjoy the carefree atmosphere. As a mother of 3, this vacation was a rare moment to let loose, and she did, smiling, laughing, and drinking freely. Unfortunately, her good spirits caught the attention of Richard Wilhelm, one of 8 men who had boarded the cruise together. Witnesses would later say these men spent much of the trip flirting aggressively and propositioning various women on board. At the disco, a cheerful and slightly tipsy Diane wrapped her arms around a ship's security guard, attempting to dance with him. The guard smiled, indulging the moment before Diane wandered off. But within 2 hours, she was seen leaving the disco with Wilhelm. That would be the last time any of her family ever saw her alive. 3 days later, on September 26th, while the ship was docked in Noumea, police detectives came aboard after being informed of a mysterious death, Diane's. Her lifeless body had been discovered in Wilhelm's cabin, where he was staying with 3 other men. Despite attempts to revive her, nothing could be done. Diane's body was eventually flown back to Brisbane, where she lived. A somber funeral was held, attended by over 24 mourners. At first, authorities attributed her death to a heart attack, but toxicology reports painted a darker picture. High levels of GHB, often called the date rape drug, were found in her system, along with alcohol. With these disturbing findings, an inquest into Diane's death was launched in March 2006. It was revealed that Wilhelm had given her the drug, but claimed it was done with her full knowledge and consent. Investigators confirmed that the two had engaged in consensual sex, and disturbing images found on a memory card belonging to one of Wilhelm's friends seemed to support this. However, it also became clear that Diane may have been manipulated and used for the group's amusement. Wilhelm wasn't the only one implicated. Mario Silvestri, another member of the group, was identified as the one who supplied the drug. Charges were filed against Wilhelm, Silvestri, and a third associate, Ryan Kuhl. Wilhelm faced manslaughter and drug charges, while the other 2 were accused of obstructing justice. Wilhelm's first trial in 2009 ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. A second trial began in April 2010. In a surprising move, Wilhelm pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but the judge rejected the plea, stating that there wasn't enough evidence to prove he intended harm and that Diane had willingly taken the drug. Eventually, Wilhelm pled guilty to the lesser charge of supplying a prohibited substance. The judge, citing the public scrutiny and mental health issues Wilhelm had endured since the incident, opted not to impose further punishment. The outcome sparked outrage from Diane's family, who felt justice had not been served. A financial settlement from P&O Cruises did little to ease their grief. Yet, Diane Brimble's tragic death wasn't entirely in vain. It led to stronger safety protocols on Australian cruise ships, including the introduction of sniffer dogs to detect drugs on board. Her story remains a chilling reminder that even in paradise, danger can hide in plain sight. In July 2017, Christy and Quentyn Manzanaris set sail on what was meant to be a joyful, week-long cruise aboard the Emerald Princess with Princess Cruises. Departing from Seattle and heading toward the stunning landscapes of Alaska, this wasn't just any vacation. It marked a special milestone, the couple's 18th wedding anniversary. Joined by their 3 daughters and other family members, it was meant to be a celebration of love that began when they were high school sweethearts. But instead of joy, the voyage turned tragic just days after it began. Early in the cruise, Kenneth's behavior reportedly became increasingly erratic, causing visible discomfort for Christy. One night, after returning to their cabin, tensions between the couple boiled over. The argument escalated quickly, and in a moment of raw honesty, Christy allegedly told Quentyn she was done with the marriage and intended to file for divorce once they were back home. She even asked him to disembark early, hoping to finish the trip in peace. That confrontation would end in horror. As the argument intensified, Quentyn Kenneth ordered their daughters out of the cabin. Moments after they left, they heard chilling screams from inside, screams that signaled something was terribly wrong. Unable to get back inside, the girls rushed to the connected balcony. What they saw was a nightmare. Their father straddling Christy on the bed, violently punching her in the head and face. In the chaos, Kenneth allegedly attempted to push Christy overboard, but a nearby passenger witnessed the struggle and intervened, grabbing her ankles and pulling her back into the cabin. By this point, the situation had turned critical. Cruise staff were alerted and security rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Christy was found on the cabin floor, covered in blood with devastating head injuries. Kenneth, his hands and clothes soaked in blood, stood amid the grisly aftermath. Security immediately handcuffed him and held him in a separate cabin until the ship reached port and FBI agents could take over. Because the crime occurred at sea, it fell under federal jurisdiction. An autopsy later confirmed what was already tragically evident. Christy had died from blunt force trauma. Kenneth was charged with second-degree murder, and what followed was a deeply disturbing legal battle. His defense claimed that he suffered from an undiagnosed brain injury and mood disorder. They argued that a combination of prescription medication and alcohol triggered a sudden and uncontrollable outburst, but prosecutors painted a very different picture, one of premeditated violence. They pointed out that Kenneth told the girls to leave and locked the door before launching the fatal attack. During his processing by the FBI, Kenneth reportedly uttered, "My life is over," a remark that hinted at a clear awareness of his actions. Eventually, Kenneth entered into a plea agreement, admitting guilt to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, and was to serve an additional 5 years of supervised release after his sentence. Before being transferred to a long-term federal facility, Kenneth was held at Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Alaska. But just weeks after sentencing, he was found unresponsive in his cell. Though no foul play was suspected, details surrounding his death and medical condition were kept confidential under prison policy. The Manzanaris case shocked the cruising world and left a family devastated. What began as a celebration of lasting love turned into one of the most tragic and horrifying events to ever take place aboard a cruise ship. In October 2013, 6-year-old Quentyn Hunter joined his family, father Cassell, mother Tashara, and 10-year-old brother Jermaine, on a 4-day cruise aboard the Carnival Victory. The boys were having a blast, especially splashing around in the ship's pool. As the cruise neared its final stretch, the brothers begged their dad for one last swim. Cassell agreed, unawares that this decision would lead to tragedy. At first, Cassell kept a close eye on Quentyn and Jermaine as they dove into the pool and played. There were no other swimmers nearby, and no lifeguards on duty. Around them, a few people were getting ready for the final party on the deck, including a DJ setting up his gear. Distracted by a conversation with one of his wife's church friends, Cassell briefly looked away from the pool, just for a few minutes. But those minutes were enough for disaster to strike. Suddenly, the DJ shouted for help, calling for someone to pull a drowning child out of the water. Cassell turned to see a stranger leap into the pool and rescue Quentyn. At that moment, Jermaine wasn't in the pool. He had stepped out earlier to dance to the DJ's music, leaving Quentyn alone in the water. As soon as Quentyn was pulled out, chaos erupted. People scrambled to resuscitate the young boy, but despite their efforts, his lungs were already filled with water. Tashara had just arrived to gather the family for dinner when she saw Quentyn lying lifeless by the poolside, a moment she later described as her worst nightmare. The ship's doctor eventually pronounced Quentyn dead. Following a thorough investigation, Quentyn's death was ruled accidental with no suspicion of foul play. But for the Hunter family, the pain was unbearable. After burying their beloved son, Quentyn's parents sought justice, hoping to hold the cruise line accountable for the absence of lifeguards. However, they soon hit a legal wall. Maritime law, under the Death on the High Seas Act, only allows families to claim financial losses like lost support or funeral costs. It doesn't cover emotional suffering, pain, or loss of companionship. This left the Hunters unable to seek compensation for the deep emotional trauma they endured. Adding to their frustration, the Hunters learned that cruise ships aren't required to have lifeguards on their pools. The only legal obligation is to post clear signs warning passengers that no lifeguard is on duty, similar to policies at many hotels and resorts on land. This lack of mandatory supervision on cruise ship pools has left many passengers vulnerable, especially young children. Despite their grief and the heartbreaking loss of Quentyn, the only response from the cruise line was a formal apology. For the Hunters, that apology was not enough. It didn't address their concerns about pool safety or the risks cruise ships pose to families with young children. Quentyn's tragic death has since sparked conversation about the need for stronger safety measures on cruise ships, especially when it comes to protecting children in pools. His story serves as a heartbreaking reminder that behind the fun and excitement of cruising, dangers can lurk, sometimes with devastating consequences. Nigel Bleatt Tinker, a 45-year-old legal expert known for his significant influence in the gaming industry, was heading back to England after spending some time in Australia. Throughout his career, Nigel had made a name for himself, holding key roles at William Hill and later as chairman at GVC Holdings, the multi-billion-pound parent company of Ladbrokes. His leadership shaped a major chapter in the gaming world. Before making his way home, Nigel decided to take a one-day cruise aboard the Seven Seas Mariner on July 23rd. The reasons for this short getaway remain unclear, but many speculate he wanted one last bit of adventure before returning to everyday life. The cruise appeared smooth and uneventful until Nigel suddenly went missing as the ship neared its final destination. His family tried to reach him but received no response, sparking concern. Ship authorities were alerted and a search began. When staff checked Nigel's cabin, they found it empty, his clothes folded neatly on the bed. A thorough search of the ship failed to find any sign of him, alive or otherwise. Nigel was officially declared missing, and an investigation was launched, but no trace was found. Months later, CCTV footage from the ship offered a chilling clue. It showed a figure, believed to be Nigel, falling from the ship near his cabin balcony late at night. This new evidence led Nigel's daughter, Sophie Elizabeth Bleatt Tinker, to seek legal closure through a presumption of death claim. During the proceedings, Sophie shared details the family hadn't disclosed before. They had kept in touch with Nigel for much of the trip, but noticed his behavior was unusual. He sent confusing and troubling messages that suggested he wasn't himself. One message to a cousin revealed deep despair, raising concerns for his mental well-being. Responding to those worries, the ship's doctor visited Nigel, but he denied feeling suicidal. Nigel reassured the doctor that physically he was fine, aside from some back pain. Despite this, the video footage and messages paint a picture of a man in distress on that fateful night. What exactly happened remains a mystery. Since the ship was miles away from any port or land when Nigel disappeared, rescue would have been nearly impossible. There were no nearby boats, and swimming to safety was highly unlikely. Was it a tragic accident, or did Nigel purposefully jump? No definitive answers have emerged. Theories continue to circulate, but none provide closure. Nigel's disappearance just a week before his 46th birthday leaves many questions unanswered. His family is left grappling with grief and the haunting uncertainty of what truly occurred on that cruise ship. This story is a somber reminder that even in moments meant for relaxation and joy, unseen battles and tragedies can unfold, leaving loved ones searching for answers that may never come. Shane Dixon, a devoted father of 3, was eagerly looking forward to his very first cruise aboard PEO's Pacific Adventure in Australia. Accompanying him was his mother, Sue Dixon, who had generously paid for the trip as a special treat for both of them. Shane was so excited about the upcoming journey that he shared several photos on social media, including one where he smiled broadly at the harbor just moments before boarding the cruise ship alongside his mother. The captions expressed how happy and thrilled he was to be partaking in this new adventure. Once on board, Shane was quickly drawn to the allure of the ship's casino. The flashing lights, the sounds of slot machines, and the promise of quick wins enticed him to give gambling a try. What began as casual play soon took a darker turn as Shane lost a significant amount of money but kept going, unable to stop. Before long, his losses snowballed and he found himself facing a hefty $5,000 debt. Later that same night, in a desperate attempt to cover his losses, Shane borrowed $5,000 from his mother. For most, such a big loss might serve as a warning sign to stop, but Shane's gambling continued unchecked. The very next night, he returned to the casino and racked up an even more staggering debt of $40,000 on top of what he already owed. As the cruise neared its end, Shane faced an impossible situation. With mounting debts and no immediate way to pay them off, he was trapped in a spiraling nightmare. His mother had already exhausted her support, and Shane was left grappling with the pressure of his growing financial burden. Then, just 2 hours before the ship was scheduled to dock back in Sydney, Shane made a tragic and shocking decision. He jumped overboard. The seas that night were rough, with waves reaching heights of 5 meters, making the search for Shane incredibly difficult. Despite these challenging conditions, rescuers managed to recover his body a few hours later. The news of his death stunned everyone on board. Passengers who had seen Shane just hours earlier described him as energetic and seemingly happy, which made his sudden and drastic action all the more heartbreaking and confusing. In the aftermath, Shane's family spoke out, sharing the emotional and personal struggles he had faced in the years leading up to the cruise. They revealed that Shane had been dealing with numerous setbacks, including serious health issues, the deaths of family members, and the breakdown of his marriage. This had led to estrangement from his children, leaving him feeling isolated and overwhelmed. On social media, Shane had been open about his struggles, often discussing how difficult life had become for him. The gambling losses he accumulated on the cruise ship seemed to have been the tipping point. For Shane, the debts represented more than just money lost. They symbolized a feeling of hopelessness and a sense that there was no way back from his mistakes. Beyond Shane's personal troubles, his family also directed criticism at the casino environment aboard the ship. They accused the casino of using manipulative tactics designed to keep gamblers playing longer and spending more money. Several other passengers who gambled alongside Shane came forward, confirming these claims. They reported being offered free drinks, prizes, and vouchers as incentives to stay engaged. Additionally, many players were unaware of how much they had lost because the casino allowed losses to be charged directly to their rooms rather than requiring immediate payment. The family also highlighted the lack of effective safeguards. Several people said they asked for self-exclusion options, a way to voluntarily ban themselves from gambling, but were told by casino staff that such options weren't available on the ship. In response to these allegations, a spokesperson for P&O Cruises denied any wrongdoing by the casino. They emphasized that responsible gambling policies are firmly in place across all their vessels, and that they take these policies seriously to protect passengers. Despite these reassurances, Shane Dixon's family was left to cope with the devastating loss of a loved one. His mother, Sue, especially, was left heartbroken and struggling to understand how a joyful trip could end in such tragedy. The story of Shane Dixon highlights not only the dangers of problem gambling, but also raises important questions about the responsibilities of casinos on cruise ships to safeguard their patrons.